Hello and welcome to another video. This is going to be really also an interesting one because we're going to be talking about the different type of summing and averaging and even counting, but those going to be very special because it's going to be based on conditions. So if you hear some if or some ifs, average if, average ifs, all these are very powerful functions that have been added in the last 10 years to Excel. We did not have these earlier because we really spent so much time in order to deal with arrays, which was kind of like kind of nightmare to really deal with those type of calculation that we're going to share in this video. Anyway, to appreciate what we're going to do, let's go ahead and hit directly to the file to see what we're going to have. Before we start talking about very complex calculation done by, not us, by Excel, let's go ahead and do the symbol counting first of all to understand counting is a major part of what we do. For example, first of all, I wanted to go ahead and put 1, 2 here, and I wanted to go ahead and see how many rows I'm dealing with. Maybe it would be much better to go ahead and teach you a little bit about how to zoom at certain area. For example, I've been using all along the zooming for 200% in order to make the video more meaningful, but I'm going to go ahead and select this area where I'm going to be using. I'm going to go ahead and zoom the selection, so it'll give me even larger area because that's the selection that I'm focusing on at this moment. Alright, so we have 1, 2 here, and I could go ahead and drag the fill handle directly down. I know how far I need to go this way. It's better than when I do actually use it with 1 and drag it all the way down. I don't know how far I need to go, but that still would work because I could go and use the autofill option and go ahead and say fill series, which is going to give me the same result. I'm going to go ahead and center that, and my concern now with this area here or this range rather, it's going to be how to use count. If you see here, if I use the count for this area, it's going to go ahead and give me the number of the item that I did not, without including this blank one. If I put something here like a word, let's say hello, and that's a word, not a number, because count only count numbers. And now if I say here count, and still including the word hello, it's going to really give me 6 because that's the 6 out of those 7 are going to be numbers. But there is a function, regardless of what you have in the cell, still will count it. It's going to be count A, and notice here we're going to have 7. If I left that as a blank and I want to count how many blank I have, then I would have to say count a blank, and that's very interesting to know. Sometimes you could get a spreadsheet that full of blanks and you want to see how many blanks you have. So go ahead and maybe select that and press Control Shift down arrow will select for you the first range. Now you hit a blank, so you could know really how far you need to go if you cannot see the columns completely because it's too large to where it goes, how far it goes down before it needs a blank. So it did actually need a blank, but I'm going to keep pressing the down arrow to move on to the next range after the blank, and tells me there is actually one blank here because there is actually one blank. So this is very, very helpful in order for counting, count A, and count blank. Now let's go to the serious one that we have talked about very briefly at the beginning of this video, where we're going to do count if. When you hear the word if, anytime in any programming or any environments, including Excel, it has to do with conditions. It has to do with selection. It has to do with the branching. It has to do with the fact that I'm going to go one way or the other based in my criteria, whether I'm going to be meeting the criteria or not. So this is very, very, very powerful. We could not have been able to do that a long time ago because we had to really go through a loop to see which one of those criteria, which one of these data meet our criteria before we count it. Anyway, we don't have to worry about the internal functionality of this function. The only thing that we need to do concern ourselves with is the productivity. We need to be productive by using the function as it is, as was written. That's why we spend money in order to buy Excel. That's why we spend time to learn how Excel communicate the function to the data, or the data to the function, in order to get the result without having to worry about how to reinvent the wheel. All right, so I have two names here. Those are my children, Rhoda and Isam. And at this time of the video, they're 15 and 16. What I'm going to be doing here, I'm going to keep track of all the money that they have asked me for at maybe, let's say, at the last month for different type of activities. The activities are not showing here, only their names. I want to see how many times Rhoda, my daughter, has asked me for money, and how many times my son, Isam, has asked me for money. So let's imagine that this list is very, very large, and we don't need to really restrict our view only on what we have. We're going to really imagine that I have like 300 lists, or maybe in a practical way, in the real world, you might have 100 or 1,000 type of employees that, or different activities associated with them. So you will say this is not going to be as helpful or as powerful as you told me. I'll tell you. The real world has a lot more data than what I'm showing you here. So let's go ahead and see how we're going to do that. We're going to go ahead and say count if, that is the function. Count if, I missed it, so if I misspelled something, of course, it's going to be missing here. Count if I say here, how many times Rhoda asked me for money without concerning ourselves with the money, it's going to be this range, okay? And I'm going to go ahead and count here, and I'm going to go ahead and now this is the range, and I want to look for Rhoda alone. So I'm not going to really type Rhoda because I'm afraid of misspelling name or adding a space. So go ahead and get that directly from the list of the data. So let's go ahead and see that. That's actually 4 times. If there's a better way of doing it, of course there is a better way of doing it. I could go ahead and say equal and say Rhoda, leave it here. And also I could say here equal and copy the name of my son there. And instead of saying here I'm going to go ahead and delete that. And it's going to be, actually it's behind it. So sometimes you have to deal with this limitation of Excel where the formula hide behind the cell and you ended up typing the cell address, which I hate to do that because also the less I type, the better I am and the less mistakes I make. Anyway, to go back to this one here, since I'm going to be using the same range A1 through A7 and I'm choosing D1, it's better for me now, since I'm going to count how many times my son Isam has asked me for. I'm going to lock this. And since it's selected, I could hit F4 and that will lock that range. Why I'm locking that range? Because my intention now is to go ahead and use the fill handle, because again, look here, it's the same range that I'm looking to count the number Isam asked me for money, and it's the same range I'm looking, which is this one here, that Rhoda, which really her name is in D1, she asked me for money. So this is become very powerful. If I have another name here, God forbid, but it's then it's going to be really to drag it also one more time. Let's go ahead and continue with this. So a very powerful function was able to do all that for us. Now it gets a little bit more interesting and more powerful. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and use this data again, similar to what we did with the zooming. I'm going to go ahead and count first of all. This is the list of the name, and this is the list of the money. I'm going to also, I have a name here for the reason. I'm not going to deal with the money yet because it's counting doesn't really do sum or averages. So I wanted to see how many times Rhoda has asked me for money, but not for shopping. She does that all the time. So when we talk about Rhoda and shopping, there is a Rhoda and schooling here. And there is also maybe other reasons she asked me for money. Now it gets a little bit more complex, more interesting to do it. So let's go ahead and see. First of all, I'm going to go ahead and put her name here, okay? And the reason that she asked me for is here, which is going to be shopping. And notice it's really interesting now to see now, in order for me to count my daughter's name, how many times it was listed, and for that specific reason, which is shopping, I have to really use now count ifs with s in the end, which is plural. Okay, so counts of what? I'm going to count all this, you know. This is the criteria. I'm going to lock it. I mean, if you're going to do it all in one time, you don't have to lock anything. But the potential that I might use Rhoda again for like school reason, Islam for shopping, or if I need to have something in the future that I'm going to repeat, it's good to lock it. If I only need to answer a question, I say I just want to know how many times Rhoda asked me for shopping, money for shopping, then I would not have to use the absolute address by locking those ranges. So here we go. The first is out of the range. I want to see Rhoda. I'm not asking for my son. And the same thing here. I'm going to go to the shopping and hit F4 and comma, and now it's shopping. So now the criteria has become two of them actually: the name of the children and also the reason for asking for the money. And notice that D2 is relative and E2 also is relative. As a result, I locked the range because my intention is to go ahead and drag it for. So she asked me 3 times for shopping. If I wanted to know about my son, and how many times he asked me for shopping, if he ever does that. So we're going to go ahead and do that and say, okay, this is going to be the same thing here. Knowing that it's a different name based on the range, and maybe it's the same reason here. It is the same reason. I could go ahead and drag that. So he did ask me 1 time for shopping. Now I could go ahead and continue with that. If I wanted to do the young lady's names, and I could go ahead and say, I want to know how many times she asked me for schooling. And of course, because I locked those, I'm not worried about confusing myself with a different answer. She asked me for money for school 1 time. So this is really count F, very, very powerful, where we could go ahead and include in the decision or the criteria, multiple criteria to answer a question such as how many times certain thing happens based on more than one criteria. Could be 2 criteria, it could be 3 criteria, it could be 4 criteria, and so forth. All right, let me go ahead and confirm this and go to the sum. We all know about the sum function. I'm going to go ahead and do that. That's the symbol sum. We all know it. It's a million way of doing it almost. I'm going to teach you one of those one here. If you go ahead and say Alt plus sign, you know, here Alt plus sign, it's going to really create for you the sum function, which we know all about it. The only thing I have to worry about is to select the range one more time. There's no anything associated with the sum when it comes to conditional summing. It has to do with straightforward sum. Now, when it comes to SUMIF, now I'm going to go ahead and look a little bit also differently. The same list of data. I wanted to sum how many time or what is the total of money that Rhoda or Assam has asked me for based on 1 criteria, their name and how much they have asked me for. So now with the count was based only on the name. The criteria was based on the name. With the count, with the sum, now we have to involve or include the amount of money in order to be corresponding to the criteria. I wanted to go ahead and find both of them. So I'm going to be locking I'm going to go ahead and say this is Rhoda and this is Isam. Okay. Okay. When people ask me what is his name, I said his name is Isam. They said, oh, is that like E? Everything starts with E these days, like e-commerce. So it was a joke for a while, but now we know his name is Isam. Anyway, let's go ahead and continue with this. I wanted to go ahead and say sum F. And we're going to go ahead and do that. And open parentheses, of course. The range is going to be this. And let's lock it since I'm going to be using it for both kids, which is F4. And now I wanted to go ahead, and the criteria is her name, Rhoda's name, and of course the third parameter is in the function. It's really the amount of money that they have spent, both of them. So it's going to go ahead and add every time she sees Rhoda's. I mean, every time that Excel. I'm sorry, I'm referring to it as a human now. Rhoda is going to be. It's going to add that to the total of the sum. Of course, that's very conditional summing. Here we go. So she has spent $77, comparing to Isam, who has spent $50. He spent here $10, $20, and $20. Okay, so of course we could go ahead and do that for matted with a dollar figure. Let's go to the sum ifs, which has to do with the fact that we have multiple criteria. It's very similar to count ifs. However, we have values to sum. So again, I could go ahead and say here, Rhoda, and I wanted to see how much she spent on shopping out of her $77 versus her school. And let's go ahead and worry just about her now. So it's going to be sum ifs, okay? And now it's going to be asking me for the sum range first. Since I'm going to do only her shopping, summing the shopping, I don't have to relock it. And remember here, the sum ifs ask for the sum range first, with the sum if only a singular ask for the criteria, range, then criteria, then the sum at the end. That might confuse some people. I need to bring that to your attention. So we have to go ahead and see the other. Here we go. This is the criteria range for the name. The name is Rhoda. You could have typed it yourself, but I don't advise you to type anything, especially with Excel. And this is the second criteria range, which is really the act or the reason for asking for the money. And of course, in this case, is the shopping. And let's see, out of the $77 that you asked me earlier for, is going to be $57 for shopping. Obviously, she had some money for schooling, which goes in here of $20. Great. So the sum if, look here one more time, we have the values. We have one criteria range, which is the name, and that's one selected kid, in this case the Rhoda, and the same, we'll continue with another criteria range, which is the reason for asking for money, and finally it's going to be also the reason, which is shopping in this case. The average if is identical to sum if, except here it's a little bit more powerful in my opinion, because not only summing them, it's actually finding the average as well. But from our perspective as an end user, it doesn't make any difference. It's the same exact things. Sum if, as you notice here, if I wanted to go ahead and sum if, average if, we already covered that. Average if, as you notice, we're going to go ahead and say the range first, okay, and we're going to go ahead and check on Isam this time, so I could treat the kids fairly. And here we go, we're going to go ahead and sum the average of how much Isam has per, request, the average. So $16.66. Of course, we could change that to currency in order to make more sense of it. So average ifs with the plural. Again, I'm going to go ahead and I need another reason for average if we need, because one of them is not going to do. So I'm going to go ahead and copy the data from sum ifs, and in this case we will be able to really apply the sum if much better. So let's go ahead and copy that here and paste it, and now I'm going to go ahead and view it by zooming the selection, and notice here we could go ahead and apply to Rhoda here. And let's go ahead and see schooling. So let's go ahead and see how much her average in schooling, and we'll go ahead and do that as sum ifs. The sum ifs, average if, sorry. I don't know why I'm possessed with sum ifs. So let's go ahead and do average ifs and open that, and we're going to go ahead and get first the actual figure that we're going to average, comma, and we have this one range here, range criteria range. Then we have the name of the child. Then we're going to have the reason for asking for the money, and again that's the criteria range. That's the specific region, which is schooling and school for money. That's the average, of course. Let's go ahead and do this here. Maybe I misspelled something. Obviously, all right. I'm going to say Averageifs. Here we go. Okay. All right. I misspelled Averageifs, which is good to really rely on Excel to finish the typing for you. So when we do that, since I'm a bad speller, I could say here average, and you could choose this Averageif and or hit the tab. Of course, or while you're typing this, if you go that far, see here, and go to this one here and hit the tab. So this is the video for Sumifs, average Averageifs, count, and countifs. I hope you enjoyed these videos, and we're going to continue in the next videos. And until then, have a great time.